They told us the deep lanes were dangerous. Everyone knew that. 30 years of navigational advisories, filed quarterly by the Varath Dominion's transit authority, warned that the outer corridor experienced unpredictable fold space disturbances, gravitational anomalies, hazards they were generous enough to catalog for us. They had been doing it since before I was born. They called it a courtesy. They called it interspecies due diligence. They called our missing ships navigational incidents, and filed each one in the Terminus archive under a 7-digit case number, and their transit authority sent a formal letter of condolence to the Terran Survey Commission on crisp, embossed stationery. And that was the end of it. 31 ships over 31 years. 22,409 crew members. I did not know my brother was one of them until the morning we went to collect the debt. My post was the secondary sensor array on the bridge of INS Heron's Reach. I was 26. I had been a junior bridge officer for 14 months, which is long enough to know the layout of your station, and short enough that you still feel slightly fraudulent every time someone calls you ensign. The Severance Ledger had been assembling in the Veth Corridor approach for 11 days, and I had watched it through the observation panels every time my rotation brought me through the aft passage. 940 ships, holding in formation so clean it made your chest tighten, their hulls dark against the corridor's pale nebula drift, their running lights off. We were not announcing ourselves. We already knew where everything was. The senior staff had read the full intelligence brief. We junior officers had been given the operational parameters. Simultaneous strike, 31 primary targets, 0 windows for evacuation of military or administrative personnel. What we had not been given, officially, was the name registry. Commander Setha read it on the bridge. She did not have to. It was not a procedural requirement. She read it anyway, at 0400 ship time, 90 seconds before the firing window, her voice carrying across the bridge with the particular flatness of someone who had made a decision about how they were going to hold themselves for the next 90 seconds, and was holding it. Survey vessel Ariadne. Lost to navigational incident. Varath case reference 0041-VDA. 31 crew. Survey vessel Callaway's Hope. Lost to navigational incident. Varath case reference 0089 VDA. 44 crew. I was watching my board. I kept watching my board. Survey vessel Heron's Grace. Lost to navigational incident. Varath case reference 0203-VDA. 61 crew. I had a brother named Dav. He was 11 years older than me. He had been a survey cartographer, which he claimed was the least glamorous job in the fleet, and which he said with a pride so obvious it made our mother roll her eyes every time he said it. He shipped out on Heron's Grace when I was 9 years old. They told us the corridor took her. They told us fold space disturbance, navigational incident, Varath Transit Advisory 0203. They told us these things happened. They told us they were sorry. They sent the letter on the embossed stationery. My hands did not leave my board. 61 crew, the commander said, and continued reading. That is the thing they teach you in the training programs, the thing that sounds like a slogan, until you are actually sitting at your station, and someone is reading your brother's ship number aloud with 60 others queued behind it. They say, you do your job. They say it because it is the only advice that is both true and survivable. Grief will wait. The board will not. I did my job. The Varath Dominion had believed, for 31 years, that darkness was a kind of armor. They operated in the outer corridor, because the outer corridor was far from Earth's primary sensor nets, because survey vessels were small, and their disappearances individually explicable, because fold space anomalies were real enough that the filings were plausible, because the gap between one incident and the next was always just long enough to let the memory settle. They were patient. They were methodical. They believed that what vanished without a trace left no trace. They did not account for us eventually noticing the shape of the absences. Intelligence Officer Cale Voss spent 4 years building the case. 31 ships, 11 years of navigational advisories. The fold space disturbance data cross-referenced against Varath's own transit authority sensor logs. The logs contradicted the filings in 6 places, then 14, then all 31. It was not a dramatic discovery, it was arithmetic. Someone sat down with a long enough dataset and did the arithmetic, and the arithmetic said, they took them. All 22,409 of them. Taken during what the Varath filed as mandatory navigational inspection, a right their transit authority had written into the Corridor Access Treaty 40 years ago, which Earth had signed in good faith, because no one anticipated that an inspection right could function as a boarding right, a seizure right, a vanishing right. The Dominion's Cognitive Research Division had wanted human neural mapping data. We were an interesting species. We were far from home. We were small enough, out there, that 31 ships over 31 years was a rounding error in their archive. Commander Setha finished the registry at 0401. The bridge was quiet in the way that rooms get quiet when no one has anything left to say, and everyone knows it. She said, "Firing window in 30 seconds. I said, "Secondary array nominal, Commander." Because that was my job, and I did it. She said, "Record is open. All frequencies." The Severance Ledger's 940 ships struck 31 Varath Corridor installations at the same second. I watched it on my board as data. 31 simultaneous contact signatures, 31 confirmation tones, clean and evenly spaced, arriving in a sequence so tight it looked like a single event. It was not a battle. They had not been expecting us. They had believed the darkness was still working. It had stopped working 4 years ago, when Kale Voss sat down with the arithmetic. We transmitted the full name registry on open Varath frequency as the installations fell. All 22,409 names, broadcast sequentially, beginning with the crew of survey vessel Ariadne and ending with the crew of survey vessel Tesseros Light. It took 41 minutes. The 31 contact signatures had already resolved to 31 confirmed neutralized by the time we reached the 500s. My brother's name came at the 480s. Davrel, cartographer 2nd class. Survey vessel Heron's Grace. Commander Setha read it the same way she read all the others. Flat, precise, moving. I watched my board. When the registry ended, she closed the transmission channel and said nothing for a moment, and then she said, "Severance Ledger. All stations stand down to monitoring posture. Secure from action." That was all. We held position in the corridor for 6 hours, while the support teams confirmed all 31 targets. No Varath vessel approached us. No signal came from the Dominion's interior. Whether they were calculating a response, or simply sitting in the particular silence of an empire that has just been told what its rounding errors cost, I don't know. I am not sure it matters. The math had been presented to them. They could check it themselves. On the return transit, I stood at the aft observation panel during my off-rotation and looked at where the corridor had been, and I thought about my brother, who had wanted to map things, who had said it was the least glamorous job in the fleet, who had been gone for 17 years before anyone thought to check the arithmetic. I don't know if what we did was justice. I know it was the answer. I know those are not always the same thing, and I know which one I can live with, and I know what the difference costs, and I know I will be paying it for a long time yet. The Varath called our ships lost. We found every one.